Picture a cold autumn morning on the coast of Nova Scotia in the year 1755. A family stands on the shore, a father, a mother, 4 children, and they are watching their own house burn. Behind them, British soldiers are herding hundreds of their neighbors toward a line of waiting ships. The men have been separated from the women. Some of the children are already on a different boat than their parents, and no one will tell them where those boats are going. These people have farmed this land for 150 years. They speak French. They have harmed no one. And by nightfall, everything they have ever known will be gone, and they will be scattered across an ocean like seed thrown to the wind. That morning is the beginning of one of the largest forced deportations in the history of North America. And here is the part that matters to you. Some of the people on those ships did not vanish. They survived. They found their way to a hot, green, half-drowned corner of Louisiana, and they built a whole new world there. A new language, a new music, a new name. We call them the Cajuns, and their blood did not stay in the bayou. It spread out across the American South and beyond, into families who have no idea it is there. If your people come from Louisiana, or Texas, or anywhere along the Gulf, there is a real chance that one of the frightened families on that shore, in 1755, is sitting in your own family tree, right now. By the end of this, you will know exactly how to find out. And I promise you, the way they survived is even more remarkable than the way they suffered. If a lost history hiding inside ordinary American families is the kind of thing that pulls you in, take 1 second and subscribe before we go further. That is the whole reason this channel exists. The bloodlines that went quiet, the names that changed, the ancestors who got erased and came back anyway. A new story every week. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand the Cajuns, you first have to meet the people they used to be. They were called the Acadians. But their story starts not in Louisiana at all, but 2,000 miles to the north. In the early 1600s, French settlers crossed the Atlantic and put down roots in a region they called Acadia, the land that today makes up Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the surrounding maritime coast of Canada. These were not soldiers or fortune hunters. They were farmers, and they did something clever and patient with that cold, tidal land. Instead of clearing forest, they built dikes along the salt marshes, walling out the sea and draining the rich soil behind it, turning drowned coastline into some of the best farmland in the New World. They even had a word for the ingenious little wooden sluice gates built into those dikes, the aboiteaux, which let fresh rainwater drain out to sea while swinging shut against the incoming salt tide. It was patient, communal, generational work. You did not build a dike for yourself, you built it for your grandchildren, and that tells you something essential about these people. They were not conquerors passing through, they were settlers digging in, a community that measured itself in centuries rather than seasons. They raised cattle, they grew wheat, they built tight little villages around Catholic churches, and for the better part of a century and a half, they simply lived. They intermarried, their families grew huge, and they developed a fierce, quiet independence, loyal to each other and to their faith, but never much interested in the wars of the kings across the ocean. That independence was about to become the most dangerous thing they owned, because Acadia sat on a fault line, right between the growing empires of France and Britain, who spent the entire century fighting over North America, and the Acadians had the terrible luck of living on ground that both sides wanted. In 1713, after one of those wars, France signed a treaty and handed mainland Acadia over to the British Crown. Overnight, without moving an inch, these French Catholic farmers became subjects of a Protestant English king who did not trust them and did not want them. For decades, an uneasy peace held. The British demanded that the Acadians swear a loyalty oath, a promise to take up arms for Britain if it came to war. And the Acadians, again and again, politely refused. Not out of rebellion, they simply would not promise to shoot at other Frenchmen, at their own cousins across the border. So they offered a compromise. They would be neutral. They would swear loyalty, but never bear arms against anyone. For years, the British grudgingly allowed it, and the Acadians became known as the French neutrals. But neutrality only works when the powerful allow it. And by 1755, the British in Nova Scotia had run out of patience. A new war between Britain and France was boiling up, and the British governor, Charles Lawrence, looked at these thousands of French-speaking Catholic farmers sitting on strategic land and saw only one thing: a threat he wanted gone. He did not want their oath anymore. He wanted their absence. And so, without approval from London, he made a decision that would shatter an entire people. He ordered the Acadians deported, all of them. Their land and livestock would be seized by the crown, their homes and barns burned so they could never return, and the people themselves loaded onto ships and scattered so widely and so deliberately that they could never gather together again. They called it, in French, Le Grand Dérangement, the Great Upheaval. And it was as cruel and as calculated as it sounds. In village after village, British soldiers summoned the men and boys into the churches under false pretenses, then locked the doors and told them they were prisoners of the crown and their lands were forfeit. Then came the ships. Families who had lived together for generations were torn apart on the beaches, husbands onto one vessel, wives and infants onto another, older children onto a third, often with no way of knowing if they would ever see each other again. Many never did. The boats were overcrowded and filthy. Disease swept through the holds. Some ships sank in Atlantic storms and took every soul aboard down with them. One vessel, the Duke William, went down in the open Atlantic with hundreds of Acadians trapped below her decks. Only a handful ever reached shore. Another group, promised passage to safety, was instead left for weeks in the holds of ships anchored just off the coast, while officials argued over what to do with them. Children arrived in distant colonial ports as orphans, their parents dead at sea, or simply lost onto a different boat, and were sometimes bound out as unpaid servants to strangers who could not understand a word they said. This was not the chaos of battle. It was administered, paperwork and all, by men who kept careful count of exactly how many souls they had loaded and precisely where they had sent them. Over the years that the deportations continued, more than 10,000 Acadians were driven out, and thousands of them died, of smallpox, of drowning, of exposure, of plain grief. And the ones who lived were dumped, deliberately, in places where they had nothing and knew no one. They were scattered along the coasts of the 13 American colonies, where Protestant communities often wanted nothing to do with a shipload of destitute French Catholics. Some were sent back across the ocean to England as prisoners, or to a France most of them had never seen, and that no longer felt like home. Some ended up in the Caribbean. A whole people had been picked up and flung across half the world, and for years they drifted, landless, stateless, searching in port after port for the faces they had lost on those beaches. Now, before we follow them to the place they finally found, stop and let this land on you personally, because this is where it becomes your story, not just a history lesson. Think about how Ancestry actually works. Every one of those exiled Acadian families that managed to survive and have children did not leave behind a handful of descendants. Over 250 years, they left behind an ocean of them. The Acadians were famous for enormous families. 8, 10, 12 children was ordinary, and that fertility did not stop in exile. It exploded. So the survivors of Le Grand Dérangement became the ancestors of millions of people alive today, spread across Louisiana, Texas, the whole Gulf South, and far beyond, a huge number of whom have no idea that a deportation in 1755 is the reason their family is where it is, and the trail they left is often hiding in plain sight, in a single word, the surname. Names like Boudreau, Guidry, LeBlanc, Trahan, Hébert, Broussard, Landry, Thibodeau, Fontenot, Comeau, Melançon. If one of those names is anywhere in your family tree, pay very close attention, because those are Acadian names, carried out of Nova Scotia on those ships and planted in southern soil. But even that is not the whole picture, because plenty of families lost the obvious French name generations ago, anglicized it, married out of it, watched it soften and change until it looked like anyone else's, while the blood kept right on running underneath. A grandmother who was Catholic in a Protestant town, a family that came from Louisiana and never said much more. a few French words that survived at the dinner table long after anyone remembered why. Those are the fingerprints of a buried Acadian line. If a channel that goes looking for exactly these buried lines, the French grandmother, the name that got flattened, the ancestor a family stopped talking about, is what you want more of, this is the moment to subscribe, because we do this every single week. Now let's follow the survivors to the one place on Earth that finally took them in. Because here is the turn in the story, and it is the part that makes the Cajuns who they are. After years of wandering, word began to spread among the scattered Acadians of a place far to the south, where they might finally be welcome. Louisiana. At the time, Louisiana had passed from French into Spanish hands, but Spain was Catholic. Spain wanted loyal settlers to work its new territory, and Spain was perfectly happy to hand land to a few thousand hard-working, deeply Catholic French farmers who had nowhere else to go. And so, through the 1760s, 70s, and 80s, the Acadians came. Some sailed up from the Caribbean, some came down from the northern colonies, some made the almost unbelievable journey all the way back from France, crossing the Atlantic a second time, to reach this swampy promised land at the bottom of the continent. What they found was nothing like the cold, tidy farms of Nova Scotia. It was hot, it was wild, it was a maze of bayous and cypress swamps and open prairie, thick with alligators and mosquitoes, and heat like a wet blanket. And these northern farmers, against every reasonable expectation, looked at it and thought, we can live here. They learned the swamp. They fished and trapped and farmed the high ground. They kept their French language and their Catholic faith and their giant families, and, cut off from France and surrounded by a new world, that old Acadian culture didn't just survive, it transformed into something entirely its own. Even the name itself changed, worn down by generations of southern tongues, until the word Acadian had softened all the way into Cajun. The people France had left behind on a Canadian beach had become something new, something that could only have grown in Louisiana. Their music picked up the fiddle and the accordion and turned into the sound we now call Cajun and Zydeco. Their cooking took French technique and married it to local crawfish, rice, and peppers, and gave the world gumbo and jambalaya and étouffée. Their French drifted away from the French of Paris into its own mother tongue, Louisiana French, spoken in the bayous for 200 years. A people who had been deliberately scattered so they could never rebuild had done the one thing their persecutors swore was impossible. They had rebuilt, bigger, louder, and more alive than before. And they kept a certain spirit too, one that historians still marvel at. A people who had every reason on earth to be bitter instead built a culture famous for the exact opposite, for feasting, for dancing, for laissez-aller bon temps rouler, let the good times roll. They held loud communal hog butcherings called boucheries and dances that ran until dawn, the fée dodo. They took Catholic Lent and Mardi Gras and turned them into their own wild rural traditions. It is almost as if, having survived a deliberate attempt to erase them from the world, they decided the sweetest possible revenge was to live as fully, as warmly, and as loudly as a people could. That spirit is still the beating heart of Cajun country today, and it too is part of the inheritance, because resilience and joy travel down a bloodline just as surely as a surname does. Now the world mostly knows this story, if it knows it at all, through a poem. In 1847, the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow published Evangeline, the tale of a young Acadian woman separated from the man she loved on the day of the deportation, who then spends her entire life wandering America searching for him. It is beautiful, it is heartbreaking, and it made the Acadian tragedy famous around the world. But hold it at arm's length, the way we always do here, because Evangeline is a legend, not a record. Longfellow was a New Englander who never set foot in Acadia and invented his heroine whole. The poem gets the grief exactly right and many of the details wrong, and the danger of a legend that powerful is that it can turn a real, documented atrocity with real names and real ships and real death tolls into a soft, sad fairy tale. The true story is harder, colder, and far better evidence than the poem. And that evidence is exactly what can connect it to you. So let's get practical. How do you actually tell if you have Cajun blood? Start with the obvious threads and pull on them. Is your family from Louisiana, or from the parts of East Texas and the Gulf Coast where Cajuns settled and spread? Do any of those Acadian surnames, Boudreaux, Guidry, LeBlanc, Dehan, Hebert, Broussard, Landry, appear anywhere in your tree, even a few generations back, even softened or misspelled? Is there French Catholic ancestry in a family that later became something else? Any of those is a thread worth following. And here is the good news that most people don't know. The Acadians are one of the most thoroughly documented populations in North American history. The Catholic Church kept meticulous baptism, marriage, and burial records. The British kept detailed lists of who they deported and where they sent them. Genealogists have spent lifetimes reconstructing Acadian family lines back to the 1600s. Combine those paper records with a modern DNA test, and an Acadian ancestor who has been invisible in your family for 200 years can suddenly step out of the shadows with a name and a village and a date. There are entire genealogical societies and searchable databases devoted to nothing but Acadian and Cajun descent, built precisely because the records run so deep. Many families discover that a single documented ancestor connects them to thousands of cousins they never knew they had, all descended from the same small band of survivors. And there is a strange justice in that. The very thing meant to scatter this people forever, all that careful British record-keeping of who was shipped where, became the map that lets their descendants find their way back. But now the honest part, because honesty is the whole point of this channel, and it is the opposite of what a lot of videos on this subject will do. A Cajun-sounding surname is a clue. It is not a verdict. French ancestry is not automatically Acadian ancestry. France sent settlers all over the New World, and plenty of French names in America have nothing to do with Nova Scotia or Louisiana at all. Some of those surnames are shared by families who were never Acadian. And a DNA test can tell you that you carry French ancestry, but it usually cannot, by itself, prove that specific Acadian Cajun line. For that you need the records. So treat the surname and the DNA result as the beginning of the search, not the end of it. Anyone who promises you certainty from your last name alone is selling you a fairy tale, the same way the poem did. What the real evidence offers is something better, a genuine question and a genuine trail that you can actually follow. So think again about that family on the shore in 1755, watching their home burn, being pulled apart on the sand. Everything was taken from them, their land, their farms, their country, in many cases each other. The most powerful empire on earth set out, on purpose, to erase them from the map so completely that they could never come back together. And they failed. The Acadians were scattered to the winds, and the winds carried them to a swamp at the bottom of a continent, where they became the Cajuns, and multiplied, and sang, and cooked, and refused to disappear. That is not a fairy tale. That is one of the great survival stories in American history, and it may be running quietly in your own blood right now, behind an ordinary Southern surname, waiting for someone to finally go looking. If this story moved you, next week I'm turning to one of the most contested bloodlines in all of America, the Lumbee, a native people the United States spent more than a century refusing to fully recognize, and the ordinary surnames that may quietly tie your own family to them. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And do me one favor before you go. If your family carries a piece of this, a French name that got changed, a grandmother from the bayou, a heritage that was always just a little bit French and never quite explained, tell me about it in the comments. Someone reading them may be searching for the very same lost line, because some families only find their way home 200 years later, when one person finally decides to ask where they really came from.